And we are live right now. So let's let everyone into the meeting. And we are live right now. So let's let everyone into the meeting. And we are live. Welcome, everybody. Love to see you all on camera. Go ahead and join us on camera, but keep your mic muted unless you are called on to speak. And we will get started here in just a second. Welcome, everybody. I'm Stephanie, and I am the founder of Dancing for Birth. I'm also a mom of 4, and my kids were born in hospital, birth center, and 2 home births. And if you're not familiar with Dancing for Birth, I'll introduce you to it. So I will share my screen here. Okay, just raise your hand up if you can see the screen share. Great. Okay, so what is Dancing for Birth? It's a radically different model of birth, and it's based on our principles of gravity, movement, and instinct. Imagine freely moving around your birth space, never being restricted to get in the bed, lay on your back, and even catching your own baby. And you'll have the support and encouragement of your care provider. Dancing for Birth parent class takes place weekly around the world on 6 continents. It's a powerful fusion of prenatal and postnatal fitness, childbirth education, and celebration. You can find a virtual or in-person Dancing for Birth parent class by going to our website, dancingforbirth.com. And birth professionals can learn and utilize the Dancing for Birth childbirth method during labor. And to do that, you'll attend our professional training. You can find upcoming training dates at dancingforbirth.com. Birth, health, and wellness professionals can become certified to teach Dancing for Birth parent class by attending our professional training and completing the certification process. All right, and we are all here and excited to learn about the neuroscience of dance. That's our presentation today. And our wonderful guest speaker is Dr. Katerina Kandelaki, and she's a neuroscientist and a dance and a movement coach. She has a PhD in the neurobiology of language, with continued study in rhythm perception of language and music. She's also a teacher of the modern dance technique, Margaret Morris movement. In 2021, she started her own company, Dance, Movement, and Breathing, which she's developing her own embodied practices, combining knowledge from neuroscience and dance. Dr. Kandelaki holds the designation professionally trained by Dancing for Birth, and she's also a certified Dancing for Birth instructor. Welcome, Dr. Kandelaki. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and to share with you my two favorite things, neuroscience and dance.
Well, we're so happy to have you. Can't wait to hear everything that you have to teach us and share with us.
All right, then I'm gonna start sharing my screen. There we go. Yes, so we're going to talk today about the neuroscience of dance. And this is the outline of my talk. Of course, you are here because you already care about this topic, but I would like to just remind you what makes us care about it, about neuroscience and dance, and yeah, why would you like to listen carefully to this presentation. Then I'm going to go into some basics about neuroanatomy and neuroscience methods, just as a disclaimer and preparation for what we will be talking about. And then I'm diving into more the juices, the content. So why is dance good for your brain? It's good news for the motor system, for brain structure, for neuroplasticity, and for brain function. And we're going to dive into these topics a little bit more. And then I will present more of a hypothesis and theory that says why these benefits of dance are found in the brain. And it's an attempt to explain these effects with the mechanism of synchrony on the level of neural oscillations, so the brain waves, and other rhythms of the body connected to neural oscillations. And for the last, I also have one slide connecting these insights that we will have today, this knowledge, to the practices of dancing for birth. So I saved the best for last. Okay, let's go. Why should I care? Well, I feel a bit like preaching to the people who already know these things, but I just want to say it. Dancing is so much more than just fitness. It doesn't isolate body parts, but it coordinates them. Therefore, it increases the connection between brain and body and boosts body awareness. We call it in neuroscience proprioception, so the perception of your own body. And for example, when you have a pain, where you have the pain, or for the birth process, for labor, where do you feel that contraction coming from, and why is that important for birth? Maybe you know even better than I in this case. Then, yeah, dance is done in groups and in an interactive manner. So it's a social activity. This aspect is very, very important. And it's done to music. Can also not be done to music, but mostly done to music, and facilitates the expression of feelings. So that is another parameter that is making it different than just fitness. And let's go into a definition that is called the neurocentric definition of dance. So I'm just going to read this. Dance consists of an unlimited series of movement patterns that are spontaneously or intentionally generated, that serve the purpose of ritual, performance, or social interaction, and that engage a diverse network of brain systems which support neurobehavioral processes in these domains. And they say 7 domains. I found different evidence from different papers, and I'm not going to go through all of them in detail. Obviously, I cannot provide an exhaustive listing of the background literature, but I will present a few of the things that I found very interesting and relevant for dancing for birth practitioners. So I'm focusing on these motor, cognitive, and social benefits, but I'm also one time towards the end mentioning something about everything of these 7 domains. So now we go into the basics of neuroanatomy and neuroscience methods. I was looking for pictures of the brain to present to you because very often in popular neuroscience talks and bibliography and books, they talk about the lizard brain, they talk about the mammalian brain, they talk about the neocortex or the human brain, but that's not so ideal anymore to talk about the brain. So I want to give you a little bit more of a, more, let's say, correct or more valid still definitions and names of brain parts. So usually this brain stem, that what says pons and the cerebellum here, that used to be called, some people still call it the lizard brain. And this is like the very ancient hardware of the brain, of our brain, that is related to involuntary movements such as breathing, coordination of very basic movements, bowel movements, and so on. Then next, in the middle here is the limbic system. And this has been called the mammalian brain. It involves areas that relate to emotions, emotion processing, memories. The hippocampus is in there. Maybe you know this name, the thalamus, which is like a center of communication between other brain areas. So this is the previously called mammalian brain. Now we just call it the limbic system. And then we have all of this extra stuff at the top that is colorful here, and that is the neocortex. This is the more developed part of the brain that exists in its most developed form in the human beings. So this is responsible for executive action, executive control, for action, for speech, for reasoning, and for vision. Yeah, things like the cognitive, mostly the higher order cognitive functions. So I would like to give you also another way of looking at the brain. So the top row is related to the neocortex, and we call this the frontal lobe, which is, as also previously mentioned, more like the control center of the brain. The parietal lobe, that has functions such as mentalizing or changing perspectives. The occipital lobe, this is where the visual system is located. The temporal lobe is where the auditory system is mostly located. And of course, these systems don't only locate in one brain area, they communicate with other brain areas, but this is at least where the sensory areas are located. In the occipital lobe for the visual system, and the temporal lobe for the auditory system. Why am I saying all this? Because the visual and the auditory systems, they are both very, very important when learning to dance, because you're copying a choreography, you're seeing something and you are doing it yourself. Also, you're listening to the music, you coordinate your action to the beat of the music. So all these things need to be working properly so that you can participate in the dance. Then we have the cerebellum and the brain stem. These are, as I said, older parts of the brain in terms of evolution, and they are responsible for motor coordination, involuntary motor action, and emotional processing, and memories, and so on. All right. Further into basics, these are the two most popular neuroscientific methods. And why did I want to include that? Because these methods just It's often you might read a popular science paper or article, or you might, somehow someone tells you something that they read. But I often find it difficult to believe whatever I read, because if you look into the details, very often the details are a bit, confusing. Why I'm saying all this, the EEG is the method that records the time signature of the brain. So this is from my own experiments. This is actually my student, used to be my student. She's moved on now. And these little circles, each one of them is a sensor, and each one of them gives a little wave of the activity. And this is the scanner I used to work with in Maastricht University. This is magnetic resonance imaging, and this machine takes pictures and videos of the brain. So a little bit more for each. I started already saying, what is EEG? It's a non-invasive method, and it measures the electric current on the scalp. So nothing inside, it's not neurosurgery related, it's just on the scalp. And this electric current on the scalp is projected from the neural activity inside the brain. So we only measure outside. And each sensor gives one time signature. And when you have many of them, so FP1, if you can see here, FP2, these are sensors that are here in the front. And they are very messy, as you can see, because they also record eye movement. So this is also a sample from my own data. And this is how the EEG activity looks like. So this is, it really looks like a signature if you try to remember what is EEG signature. There are all these lines. And then what is MRI? MRI has many different applications, but two of the most popular ones are the structural MRI and the functional MRI applications. So the structural is what I like to call pictures of the brain. So what I wanted to depict here is when the subject of the picture stays still, then you get a nice clean picture, like here with a little girl and here on the top panel. But when the subject of the picture is moving, then you get a blurry picture, and the same happens with the brain. I don't know if you've been inside an MRI and they try to take a scan of your brain or a scan of any other body part. They say, please, for the amount of time you will be laying in the scanner, we would like you to be still. This is the reason, because else they won't get clean pictures. And this is a way to see the gray and the white matter volume. The gray matter is the actual brain areas, the areas that do the processing, and the white matter are the connections between the areas. And this is where the, let's say, there is a communication of messages between gray matter via the white matter, to say it in very simple terms. And then, as I said, one side is the structural MRI and the other side is the functional MRI. This is, if you want to parallel it to pictures, this is like 20 pictures per, I'm just random number now, 20 pictures per second. Actually, in my PhD, I had 33 pictures per second. No, 33 slices per second, I'm sorry. And this is how it looks like. Within 1 second, the machine scans the whole of your brain, and then it puts the one picture together. And I would like you to just, observe this video. It's, you will hear two things during this video. You will hear the noise of the scanner doing the scanning, and it sounds, every little noise, it sounds like this thing is every little picture it takes. And you will hear my previous colleague singing in the scanner, and that is also his voice. So you will hear these two things just for fun. I thought then you can understand how fast these pictures are taken. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to restart the video.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
All right. Okay, I hope you had fun with that, and also that helped you understand what is the functional MRI. It's video of the brain. Okay, in this example that I showed you, it's the whole head and the throat that they were interested in. But if that happens and only with the brain, then that is functional MRI. And it can record indeed the brain in action as related to functions such as memory, attention, speech, and so on. Right. And why did I start this whole story about the neuroscientific methods and my skepticism about some of the popular science things? Is because these methods are both movement sensitive. What does that mean? This means that if you have someone with an EEG cap and they're doing some processing in their brain, if they clench their teeth, that will be shown in the EEG, so in the signature. Imagine if you have that EEG cap on and you dance. So that is very sensitive to any kind of movement. So very often these experiments that I'm gonna talk about and the evidence that I found and will share with you, they are from experiments where people were watching some dance. So it's more of the perception. And some of the participants were dancers, some of the participants were not dancers, other participants were older individuals who participated in an intervention, or children that participated in an intervention. So this is all different participants, but the paradigms, as we say, or the setup, in the experimental setup, mostly involves someone watching dance. And only one study that I have seen involved people moving their legs while they were inside the MRI scanner. So also the fMRI is very sensitive to movement. Okay. Let me try to have this full screen again. Sorry about this. All right, there we go. So that's what I just said. Experimental setups, participants watch something on the screen, mostly with EEG, they're sitting, with fMRI, they're laying, and then most studies, they were perceptive, excuse me. I'm not studying people while dancing, but while watching a performance and maybe imitating the steps. So this might have affected the results and the brain regions and the systems we're going to talk about today. But keeping that in mind doesn't mean we cannot visit all the studies. We just keep that in mind and we visit the studies nevertheless. Okay, so we did some of the basics, and now we're going to the actual core of the talk. So what is dance good news for? It's good news for the motor system, obviously. Your motor system is here between the frontal and the parietal lobe. You have the primary motor cortex, you have the premotor cortex and the supplementary motor area. The premotor and the supplementary, they are both preparing movement, and the primary motor cortex has the connections via your spine to your muscles, and they execute the movement. You can also see within the primary motor cortex how is the division in terms of body parts. So you get foot, toes, hip, and going to the elbow, wrist, hand. Hand is very well represented. You have a lot of receptors that are responsive to the hand. And then you have the face, and as expected as well, you have very strong receptors for the lips and the tongue. This is where we are very sensitive, also as represented in our primary motor cortex. So this organization is called the homunculus, just in case you wanted to learn another Latin word for today. Yes, so here I would also say that it's not the motor system only that is up here, but there are motor functions that are coordinated with the cerebellum. So basically, it's not just the neocortex, but it's also further older brain areas and how they connect to the motor system that is affected by dance. And yeah, good question. How could they discover that it does affect the motor system? It's because we have something called the action observation network. And what they did in this study from 2017 is they presented video clips. This was the one condition, the dance video clip, or a control condition with some animals, again, also video clip. And they asked them to try to imagine doing the dance in the dance condition. And there, what happened was that this action observation network showed up for dancers versus not dancers, and for dance versus control conditions. And this is functional MRI scans. And this is usually the way we get these blobs is when we say, okay, this is the activation of the dancers, and this is the activation of the non-dancers. And if we subtract the one from the other, this is the difference. So whatever you see these blobs, they represent the difference between dancers and non-dancers. And you can see some brainstem areas, some cerebellum going on here, some of the preparatory areas of the motor cortex. I think this is premotor, and some more visual cortices, occipital in the back. So you see that there is the motor system, one thing, but you, because of the setup, you get to see the action observation network in the dancer's brain that is also different than the non-dancer's brain. Also very, very important in this study, because they correlated the strength of the effect to the dance expertise, and they found indeed that the higher the expertise, and the way the expertise was defined was with hours of practice. So the more hours of practice, the more the expertise, and the stronger this effect on the action observation network. Now we proceed to the structural changes for the brain. So good news for brain structure. And this is all from this, I don't know how to pronounce this name, Teixeira Machado study. This is the review, and they have summarized the findings on structural changes, which means changes in the brain structure itself. So not while doing some action, but in the structure after a long time of training. So they found, in this study, they found that dancers had a larger hippocampal volume than non-dancers. This is from that study, this image. And again, as I said, this is fMRI. This is a structural MRI. So these are the pictures now, not the videos. And this overlays the dancers and the non-dancers. And the difference is this highlighted blob, the hippocampal volume. My animation didn't work here. Okay, then I'm just going to show it to you bit by bit. There we go. So the next thing I wanted to show you is that there was gray matter volume, increased gray matter volume in the left precentral and parahippocampal gyrus. So this is from the Müller study in 2017. And you can see this precentral gyrus is premotor cortex, so it belongs to the motor areas, and the parahippocampal gyrus that has to do, again, hippocampus means memory, and parahippocampal gyrus means related to memory. So again, motor and memory changes in structure. Sorry, let me rephrase. Changes in the structure of areas related to motor and memory functions. Let me see, what was this again? And yes, and this relates to gray matter when the processing is done, as I said, in areas of the brain. And my next slide, let's hope that the animations work better this time. So this is, again, the third part of the structural changes. This is white matter integrity. I found this funny depiction because I really like how it uses this London Tube station mark to show that it's another station here, and what we're focusing is the connections between the stations, and that is the white matter of the processing brain. And indeed, in these two studies, they have found, this is the study that I showed you with the different video clips, the dancing versus the animal video clips. They found that the dancers had increased white matter integrity. This means thicker connections between regions. White matter, when I said, is where the communication between regions is where the communication is done. So how processing areas are connected. So stronger connections means that the messages can travel faster. You have better communications between regions, for example, between cerebellum and motor, premotor cortex, and so on. Okay, now we move to the next bit. Dance has good news for neuroplasticity, and this is, neuroplasticity means the ability of the brain to adapt and change depending on the experiences we feed it with. So this is very important for learning. This is very important for aging, and basically in practice it means whichever connections are activated more, they get stronger. That's why I have included this picture here. So if some connections start like this, and then you train more, these connections to certain brain areas, to certain motoric skills, to certain thinking skills, these connections will get stronger with more axons, so more of these long bits of the neurons that connect to each other. And this will manifest then in the behavior as a greater skill. So good example for this kind of thing are musicians and dancers, expert musicians, expert dancers. They have so many hours of practice. They have such strong connections between certain parts of the brain. And this essentially, in neural terms, constitutes their skill. Okay, so yeah, if you are an expert dancer, you have stronger connections in areas of the brain that associate movement with sequencing or preparation of movement, or stronger connections between how you perceive movement and then how you copy it with motor commands. Yes, and now we move to brain function. This is again from this review, and I looked into these studies one by one, and not all of them were very relevant, so that's why I'm not going into much detail here. But essentially, when we want to relate these structural changes that I mentioned before with function, so with cognitive functions, then there was found that there is a significant improvement in memory. This study studied older adults and had a 6-month dance intervention program. And indeed, after that dance intervention program, their memory of sequences improved. And wherever you see this study, Kattenschwarz et al., 2013, it's about older adults, and that improved their memory, their attention, and their balance. Then this one, Doi et al., improved story memory for adults with mild cognitive impairment. So this is really also very interesting, but not entirely relevant for Dancing for Birth, because we are not dealing with clinical populations, let's say. But story memory, again, because of learning a sequence of movements in dance. There was also other types of memory, but that didn't improve their ability. Oh, the dance didn't improve the other types of memory, only story memory. And then attention, balance, and psychosocial parameters, such as reduction in stress, reduction in loneliness. So I don't have more on this because I would need to go into a lot of detail, and I would like to move to the next idea. So I think this is something that I find very interesting, and the fact that dance improves motor coordination and balance, and it is visible inside the brain activations, and how these authors connected it to clinical populations, but I would like also to connect it to expecting mothers and postpartum mothers. So I'm going to read this. Even casual participation in activities involving coordination may positively impact balance and potentially lead to reduced risk of falls. So basically, what this means is when even just a weekly class for a few months during pregnancy, it will help the expecting person to have better balance, to have better motor coordination, and to, if, let's say, there might be some difficulty in climbing down the stairs or something like that, they are better protected if they have done some dancing that has improved their coordination and balance. And I'm reading the next one. Accumulation of motor skills at both casual and expert levels may lead to greater motor reserve that could be protective against aging and other progressive neurological disorders. So again, this goes towards the clinical direction, but I would like to just take this phrase motor reserve, which is very, very important also for the labor. So the process of the labor, where one can indeed, you can think about it like a motor reservoir, a motor reserve, motor vocabulary, let's say, that you will gain with training and dance that you could then employ during labor. So you are more fluent in movement. In the language of movement, which is very, very useful to aid the progress of the baby. Okay, so we've come so far, and now I have a surprise for you. I have a dancing activity for you. So let me check the time. All right.
Yay, we love dance activities and surprises.
All right, so what I'd like to do now is, yes, first of all, I would like to ask you, how closely are you feeling to each other right now? And maybe if you would like to to type a number in the chat so that maybe Stephanie can read it and just give us a feeling of what do people feel like, how closely related, how closely are you feeling to each other just now as we are all participating in this talk. Let's see the chat. I can start. 1, yeah, I agree. Maybe I have like, maybe a 2.
Okay, I see 1s, 2s, 3s coming in.
That's it, yeah. Okay, 2, yeah, nice. I suppose now that I'm looking, people might be feeling, yeah, I feel very connected to you now that you're looking. Okay, let's go to my next step. I wanted to dance with you, and if you move the view from speaker into gallery, that would be helpful. And then I would like to have, let's say, 2 groups. If your name starts with a letter from A to K, then you are group 1. If your name starts from L to or M, I don't remember, from the rest of the alphabet, let's just say, then you're group 2. And now I'm going to put on some music, and people from group 2 will find one person from group 1 and will copy their movements. Okay?
Okay, and Katerina, could you stop your screen share for a moment?
Oh,
and
yeah.
that way we'll be able to see each other better.
Yes, that's a good point. How's that now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we can see each other. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me find my music. So is the task clear? You find a person from...
Repeat it one more time. Thank you.
Yeah. So you are group 1 or group 2. If your name starts with A to K, you're group 1. If your name starts with the next letters of the alphabet until the end of the alphabet, you are group 2. Now what we do is group 1 dances, group 2 copies. Okay. And then we will flip it later. So if you're group 1, just dance freely. If you're group 2, pick a person from group 1 and copy their movement.
You want to dance with mommy? Come and dance with mommy.
And there is one participant with their sound on. Oh yeah, thank you. All right. So let's wait, I want to play some music for you. I see you're dancing. That's awesome. Okay. Now I'm not sharing the music. Wait. So sorry. Only share sound. That's it. And okay. Now it should do. Let's.
I want your love. Said dash inte med garanti. Adin sayam to en gay. För du sa här jag det. Andiamo, 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 yeah. Bang, bang, bang. T'es موجودة زي ما تانك تانك تانك. هذا سلتي bum bum bum. dice te dun dun dun. But don't make tu cha 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 cha. I know you gon' swallow la la. Haydi dite onne mamma mamma. Jag ma pretty gal la 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 la. But do me part to a shake 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 shake. But do me arm med break break break.
Okay, great. And now we switch. So I am now in group 1, so I'm going to copy. Whoever was in group 1, you copy. Whoever was in group 2, you dance freely. Yeah? Let's go.
Po du me nxonë edhe kur më mos me t'lun. Për që da jë mardhe dhe jëm du ton. I want your love, se dashin ti me garante ke. Adin sa jam tu gay. Për ty sa herë jëm de. Andiamo, io, andiamo, andiamo, yeah, yeah. Baj, baj, baj. Kush ka thonë si në bashkarajt. Te den se te du krejt. As me satellit së në gjejn. Andiamo, e di që do, e di që dua. Jëmra për i galla la 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 la. E kan von krejt tani, se kan zon këll.
All right, great. Thank you. And now, please also give us another estimate. How closely are you feeling? And how connected are you feeling? in the chat. 5, 8, 6, 6, 7. Yeah, definitely increasing, right? Right. Thank you. And the last thing I wanted to do with you in terms of dancing activity is a little choreography. So what I'm gonna do is with this music that I just shown you, but we're all gonna learn this little choreography, and there are movements from Dancing for Birds. So I think most of you are familiar with them. Let me get my scarf. So the first movement is 4 circles. So it's one direction 4 times, 3, 4, and then you change direction 4 times in the other direction. 2, 3, 4. That's the first movement. Second movement, small circles with the pelvis. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in one direction, and then the opposite 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it visible? Can you see? You do like this? Yes, thank you. Good. That was the second movement. Small circles, big circles. And if you want, you can also do this movement of gathering the love. So we do 1 and 2, and then the opposite direction again 1 and 2. We do two because they are slower than the in this case. So that was 3 slow circles, slow big circles, and the fourth is down baby down. So with a big movement, we do a little bounce. Yeah, and we do 2 in one direction and 2 in the opposite. This is all, and then the fifth, let's say movement, but it's more like free dance. It says shake, shake, shake. So you can just play with the screen, go away, come together, whatever you want. And then we start from the beginning. Yeah? Clear?
Sounds great.
Okay, super. From the beginning.
I want your love, se dash intime garante che ad insajam tu ngej për ty sa herë jam de. Andiamo, oh, io, oh, oh. Andiamo, oh, oh, andiamo, oh, oh, yeah, yeah. Bang, bang, bang. Ti mo gjujt e si me tank, tank, tank. Hajde sillet e bam, bam, bam. E di që ti dun, dun, dun. Po du me këty me ty, cha, 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 cha. I know you gon' swalla, la, la. Hajde dite une, mama, mama. Jam a pretty gal, la, 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 la. Po du me batu e shake, 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 shake. Po du me ardhe me t'prek, prek, 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 prek. Po du me n'zonë edhe kur mo mos me t'lon. Për që ta jëm ardhe dhe jëm t'u ton. I want your love, se dashin ti me garante ke. Adin sa jam t'u ngej. Për ty sa herë jëm de. Andiamo, oh, io, oh, oh. Andiamo, oh, oh, andiamo, oh, oh, yeah, yeah. Baj, baj, baj. Kush ka thonë si në bashkarajt. Te e den se te du krejt. As me satelit së në gjejn. Andiamo, e di që do, e di që dua. You're my pretty gal, la 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 la. E kan von krejt hanni tanni. Se kan zon kë lalle lalle. E kan von krejt hanni tanni. Se kan zon kë lalle lalle. I want your love, se dashin ti me garante ke. Adin sa jam tu.
Okay. That's it. That was my dance activity. Can you now tell how connected you feel?
Say it again. You want us to do a new number in the box?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Or the same, depending how you feel.
Ooh, I see 10s, 9s, 6, 7, 9 again. Whee! 9.
I'm so glad this worked. I just thought of it, and I'm really, really happy that it worked. So yes, thank you everyone for feeding back and for taking part in the dance. I really enjoyed it. And indeed, that is my point. In the next few slides, I will give a little bit of a more brainiac explanation of why this worked so nicely and what happened, which brain regions worked together and so on. So indeed, when we hadn't done anything together, yeah, we were just participants in a Zoom meeting. Then we did something together, then we felt a little bit closer, and then we did something all together, one specific choreography that we all did the same movement, possibly breathed in a similar way, and we also looked at each other. That's very, very important, and that was very connecting. All right, now I'm going to go back.
And
yes,
we will have an opportunity for you to ask questions too, so you can start formulating your questions.
Yes, I'm happy to discuss any of your questions after the presentation. And if there's anything that it's unclear, you can also write it and I can address it immediately if something is unclear. So I'm gonna go share my screen again. There we are. So we did the dance activity. And now I'm going to go to this explanation into the possible mechanism of the neural synchrony. That could be a way to explain why dance is good news for all these brain structures and functions. Yeah, so let's start very basic again. Rhythmic patterns are everywhere throughout nature. So the exchange of night and day, so the sun, the moon, the cyclic movements of the sun and the moon, the rhythm of a tide, low tide, high tide, the phases of the moon are all rhythmic patterns throughout nature. And excuse me. And there are a lot of natural systems that have this kind of rhythmic feature. We call them periodic, means that they do a cycle and from some point onwards, the cycle just repeats. Many of these systems are also complex, which means that cycle length is not always the same, but it organizes and it deorganizes within the system on itself. So this kind of systems are DNA is a DNA structure, or schools of fish where they come together and so on, or groups of insects that are organized. These are complex systems that are found in nature. And the brain is such a complex system, a self-organizing system, and it organizes itself in activity patterns. We call them neural oscillations or simply brain waves. And how do these neural oscillations come about? When you have, so each dot in this upper part of the graph is neuronal spiking, which means the neurons that I showed you earlier with the different axons, every time there is communication, they spike. So every little dot in this graph is one spike. And when spikes happen all together at the same time, the power rises in that area. The field potential, we call it, rises. So it creates this high energy, high power. Then in between, you see here, if we would draw a line, you'd see here, there is no spiking or almost no spiking. So the power drops. And then when the power rises again with more spiking, the curve comes up again. And this is how the oscillations are happening, because neurons spike in different speeds. So, and you have different speeds, different frequencies of the neural oscillations, fast frequencies like gamma and slow frequencies like delta. And this is how the brain regions communicate with each other. So very often, people say that an expert's brain has been found to be higher in alpha activity when they do their expert task, for example. So that's why I'm saying all this. And with these brainwaves, when these brainwaves flow together in power or in phase, so when they are equally high power or when they come at the same time, so when they spike at the same time, we call that synchrony. And this synchrony can happen within the same brain or between different brains. So within the same brain, two different brain regions might synchronize. This means they communicate with each other. And between different brains, they might synchronize with, if, for example, two people are listening to the same music, then their brain waves synchronize to the music and they synchronize to each other. And this is, this is also how we ended up synchronizing, because we synchronize with the music, but also with a movement. And that synchronization is a between different people's brains synchronization. And I will tell you now more what this hypothesis says about social connection in between different people's brains. Okay, so yes, I forgot one thing. It's not only the brains that synchronize, it's also other rhythms in the body. So the brain waves are only part of these periodicities, these rhythms that we have in our body. We also have rhythms like heartbeat, obviously, the breathing, the intestines, they work in different rhythms, and they this study has found that they correspond to each other in terms of ratio. So I don't know if it's visible, but here it's HR, it means heart, this heart frequency, heart rate, and then in certain ratios to the heart rate, each individual's brain waves and other like, let's say, respiration, for example, happens. So the heart rate is in this paper supposed to be central, and from the heart rate, other rhythms of the body get regulated, like neural oscillations, breathing, and the gut system. And we have a new framework in my previous lab, where we work with connection between the heart rate, the breathing rate, and the neural oscillations to understand how these systems may affect each other. And this is what happened when we danced. So first of all, each individual was moving individually. So each of these systems consider it one individual. So my heart, my brain, my lungs were doing their own thing inside my body. And then I asked you to copy a person, and then you were basically aligning from the visual input your movement, and with that the rest was aligning, but only to one person. And that's why you felt maybe a little bit more connected, but not really as a group connected. And then when we danced all together the movements of the choreography that I gave you, then this happened between all of us. And for example, I have now 5 individuals here. So, it's a connection between the rhythms of the brain and the body between each other. That is the neural hypothesis, the neural synchrony hypothesis. And now from this paper, and to be honest with you, when I started reading this paper, I was amazed at how similar were my ideas to their ideas. So this was my kind of graph for what are the rhythms of the body and how do they relate to the neural oscillations. And this was their kind of graph with the neural synchrony in the middle, and then saying what kind of types of neural synchrony there exist. And this is where I'm going to go to the different types shortly. So this is within one individual, intra-brain synchrony, so within their own brain. And this is 3 different individuals. Within themselves, there is intra, and between each other is inter-brain synchrony. And the idea is that when we have this graph, when we have this synchrony, we feel more connected, we feel less lonely. We haven't tested that yet, but yeah, maybe next comes that. So I'm going to visit a few of these now. The sensory is when you say, okay, synchrony can be of sensory nature. For example, in dance, often you lay on the floor, or you move on the floor, or you might have an item that you are manipulating, a stick, or I don't know, a drum, and then you feel the body in connection to these objects, or you might be improvising or dancing with someone else. This is also sensory information, so tactile information, but it's but also what we had here via Zoom, the visual information. So the visual information came in as sensory information, and then it got translated into motor information. So, and it is beneficial, this synchrony is beneficial for the motor functions, because movement enhances the intra-brain synchrony in the preparation, execution, perception, and imagining of the movement. So remember when I showed you the different, the motor network? Within the motor network, there were different regions. So the premotor area that prepares, the motor area that sends the motor commands. All these 2 areas, and in relation with other areas such as the cerebellum, they are involved in this intra-brain synchrony. So these areas synchronize when we do preparation of movement, execution of movement, when we perceive the movement as we did, and when we imagine the movement. Maybe later you will imagine it, and these motor areas will still spike and replicate that activity of previously. And then we have cognitive benefits of this synchrony that are manifesting in learning sequences, how it improves attention, imagery, so imagining things, problem solving, and short and long-term memory. This is something very interesting to me, the rhythmic benefits. So when you have, in early development, rhythmic interactions with your baby, this enhances the neural synchrony between parent and child. And in this way, the connection is stronger between parent and child. When you dance with your baby, then this synchronicity of the body movement to musical rhythm, this helps the infant to move to musical rhythms. So the infant regulates their own movement and perception at the same time, because you give them like a head start, maybe something like that. So then the social benefits, people have found greater empathizing abilities in dancers, and higher neural synchrony. This shows emotional connectivity between parent and child. So dancers have been found to feel empathy towards other people, like the neural pathways between associative and let's say feeling areas of the brain were stronger in dancers, and the emotional connectivity between parent and child was also stronger because they had high neural synchrony. For example, when you look each other in the eyes, that increases the synchrony. Yes, so dance has the benefit of emotional self-expression through bodily gestures and movements, and often involves emotional interactions with others. It can also cause emotional reactions for dancers themselves and for audience members when they watch dance. And lastly, dance enhances the creative abilities, and especially in forms of dance where they are focused on self-expression, such as improvisation. And the way creativity is theorized to happen in these cases is that there is a lot of communication and flow of information between sensory and association areas of the brain. So you feel something, you imagine something, that goes back into your feeling and movement, and from the movement that goes back into the imagination and so on. So you're in a state of flow, let's say, in this improvisation, creative dance. So let me see the time. That's a lot of time. But this is my concluding the connection to Dancing for Birth. And also coming back to why should you care, specifically this crowd of people. I find very, very important to stress the fact that there is improvement in coordination and balance during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This makes your life safer, frankly speaking. Proprioception, that is the perception of your own body awareness. And this can be explained via the brain-body dynamics, the system that I told you that the neural oscillations register the heart rate or register the movement, and then that connection increases the proprioception. That helps in the communication of mother and baby when the baby is in utero. So when you have a body that is trained to perceive its own itself strongly, then you have more chances to communicate with your baby in utero. And the good news is that this is a skill, and the more you train it, the better you can get at it. So even if you might think, or even if you have a client who says, no, I can't communicate, you just, one is the belief and two is the training. So definitely possible. Synchrony in rhythmic movement. What I mean with this is when you have your baby and you dance with the baby in the postpartum times, that movement and the synchronization between you, this is communication. In baby terms, this is very strong communication. Because babies feel the way you feel, they are very perceptive in this interaction. That ends up enhancing the development of the child in social, emotional, and physical ways via the movement, basically, via the connection with you, via the expression of emotions that you have and they share, and via the freedom of movement that you allow them, that helps them progress in their milestones in their development of movement. And this also supports the healthy attachment between baby and parent, and who doesn't want that? And this is my last, what is relevant for Dancing for Birth is very, very important, the social connection that one has in these classes, because it leads to forming a social support network between the birthing families. I even noticed it with my swimming class that I had, but even stronger with Dancing for Birth, because we shared our fears, we shared not only the dance, but the dance opened the gates to share even more. So in that sense, it's a very valuable resource to have the social support network. Okay, then I did whatever I promised I would do, and just showing you a little bit of a depiction of our journey. We started with why should you care? We visited the basics. We went into dive deeply into what is dance good for your brain. Then we visited the hypothesis of the neural synchrony, and then a little bit of the connection to Dancing for Birth. Thank you very much, and I'm really looking forward to your questions. This is also the literature.
Thank you so much, Katerina. It's so fascinating, and you took really complex brain science. You put it into language that we can understand and apply into our lives. So thank you so much. I'm sure everyone has lots of questions for you just to dig into this topic. So we'll just open it up. If you have a question, go ahead and you can raise your hand. Okay, Caitlin.
Hi. So I have a question that's very specific. So for people who are neurodivergent, right? So you're autistic, you're dyspraxic, I have dyspraxia, and I came from a theater background, and I just remember taking lots of dance classes and trying to do that and just feeling frustrated because I couldn't do the movements correctly. So if there's someone that's neurodivergent and we're like, birth, and this is great for birth, and this is all great, and it's going to connect all your things, but they're nervous because they're anxious about how they're going to look and how people, can you just speak to that a little bit for those who dance doesn't feel like a natural thing?
I think it's not only me who can answer this question, but since you're directing the question to me, I would just say it's for fun. It's not for performance. It is for feeling good. And if it helps you to close your eyes. But then, of course, you don't have the connection to the other people in the group. And maybe even Stephanie can answer this as well.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit. In our Dancing for Birth classes, we dance together in a circle. And so we're not looking at ourselves in the mirror, and we're definitely not performing. We're experiencing it together as a group. We're all totally vulnerable, and it feels so safe there and so fun because we're dancing for how it feels. It feels good. It feels freeing. You let go of stress. I know for myself, I'm never thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. I'm really right there in the moment. And so that brings such a feeling of peace and happiness. And there's just a lot of joy in dancing for how it feels to you, not worrying about, if you're getting it right or if you're doing the same thing as other people, but just really doing what flows out of you.
If I may add a little bit more, now that I thought about it a bit more, I took the time that Stephanie was answering. I think maybe you are addressing a point there, because when a person has a diagnosis, when they have a certain label to them, even just the neurodivergent term, they might feel different. They might feel less or more or whatever. And I think it is a bit of more work for the facilitator, for the dance teacher, to say we are here to have fun. The fact that your brain is different, it doesn't mean that it cannot do different connections between regions and so on. So now my scientific brain is also saying to me, okay, maybe this person has a deficiency or a difficulty, let's say a challenge doing language, but they don't care, their brain doesn't care about dancing so much in the sense of it doesn't have any issues with dancing, it has problems with language. So why then carry on that label that is irrelevant? So, and the hopeful message also, it comes from neuroplasticity, because the more you train something, the better you get at it. So you start, you close your eyes, you do it for fun, and you will get better because you do it together, and because the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
I hope I have covered the question.
Katerina, I wanted to build on what you were doing with us about the dancing together, because there's studies out there. One specifically studied what happens when a group of people dances in synchrony together, and it demonstrated exactly what we experienced here, which is that the feelings of social closeness, and then also it demonstrated that as a group we would have a higher pain threshold, which is really interesting. And that, of course, is directly applicable to labor and birth, which can be painful sometimes. And so dancing together, dancing in synchrony, dancing the same move with other people at the same time can actually raise our pain threshold. Is there anything that you want to add about that?
Yes, I've also read that study, and also in relation to partners in specific, with regard to touch. So if you have touch from your partner, I think the experimental setup was very minimal. So on the one hand, they were holding hands with their partner, and with the other hand, they have this stress and pain experiment where they put their hand in cold water. So basically, this is how you determine the pain threshold. And they noticed that when they were holding hands with their partner, the pain threshold was higher. So that is insane stuff, and it works. And yeah, I can also imagine that when you have, during labor, when you have a supportive touch, when you have a supportive synchrony with your doula, your birthing team, for sure, it can help you process pain in a different way. Yes.
Yeah. Chris, you have your hand raised. Chris with a K.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I was just curious if there's any studies that have been done in relation to singing and when you're dancing as well. So, because when I was giving birth, there's more sound and more movement, the less pain I felt. So I'm just curious if there's any science behind that.
Singing is another option to synchronize between brains. So listening to music, singing, being in a choir, that also has a very good social connection for the starting from the synchrony of the brain, influencing the connection between the members of the choir. I don't know how to put it in the context of labor, because I didn't. Oh yeah. For my birth, I have to say I did sing a little bit when I danced. I danced one piece that gave me a lot of courage, and I did sing it alone. So I can imagine that it just is one more stimulus that trains the synchrony between things, so the auditory and the vocal together. So dancing and singing together, that could have an additive effect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add, if anyone here is familiar with the work of Michel Audant, a French obstetrician, he promotes that singing would be perfect prenatal participation for birth. So singing together, pregnant individuals singing together at the same time constitutes a wonderful preparation for birth. And so I believe that he also observed that singing during the labor is beneficial.
Nice.
Okay, Tawny, your hand is raised.
Hi, yeah, thank you for that presentation. I am currently in a master's program, and I'm thinking about writing my thesis with like dance therapy. So I appreciate this, and I'm curious if Katerina, you can recommend any books. And I did write down the studies, and I'm curious if we can get some of that reference page for more of those studies so I can reread those. But is there a book, or does anybody know of like a book that has some of this modern neurobiology and neuroscience with dance? I mean, I know there's some like dance therapy books, and I'm open to any names or suggestions that you guys love, but I'm curious if there's anything that's kind of like a little more cutting edge, with the science currently.
If you want to focus on the science and be the most updated, I will look for reviews rather than books. Books usually have a more consolidated knowledge and are maybe around 5 years later in terms of research. So for your thesis, of course you can read some books as well. I don't have a certain, but I think from the references that I have shared in the end, and I'm happy to share the slides as well if you find that helpful, of course. From the references, there are references to other books. Like within one of the reviews, you can find references to books. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, thank you. If there's a way for us to get those, because I wrote them down, but probably spelled things wrong and stuff.
Yeah, no problem. I can send this to Stephanie if you would like. Yeah.
Yeah. And Erin in the chat is sharing a book called Why We Dance, A Philosophy of Bodily Becoming.
Oh,
So that
great.
might be a
Thank
good
you
one
guys so much.
to check out.
I also
My
Katerina,
favorite book. It's really very inspiring in so many ways. Yeah, it's great for
Yeah,
all
thank
of
you for
us.
sharing that, Erin. And Katerina, I have a question for you. There are quite a few studies that are focusing on people who are dealing with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and studying different types of exercise as therapies. And to my knowledge, what they found was that nothing was as beneficial as dance. Could be other types of working out, other types of group activities,
Yes.
but dance was the most beneficial. Yeah.
Yes, I'm aware of this study from the University of Magdeburg that's in Germany. They did an intervention with two groups, one group fitness group and another group dance group, and I'm specifically saying both were groups, so you do have the group factor, but what you don't have in the fitness group is the synchronicity between the participants and the learning of sequences and so on. So indeed, they have found more benefits in terms of social connection between the people, and that also enhanced their cognitive abilities. One of the studies where I said good news for brain function, that is the study that I'm referring to right now. So yeah, they did find some benefits. Yeah.
Thank you. I also thought it was really interesting how you're talking about dancing as being beneficial as a way to communicate with your child in the womb. And I've always felt that. In fact, my babies in the womb told me things like what their gender was and what their name should be. And I thought, oh, I must be such an, empathic person. I could understand that, but maybe it actually had a lot to do with the fact that I was dancing with them while I was pregnant with them.
Yeah, I think pregnancy is such a strong experience, and it enhances also your spiritual awareness, especially in the third trimester. I found that for myself. I had some insights, not exactly directly connecting with the baby in this direct manner, but insights about my being and so on. So I cannot find any scientific evidence for that, but it can be an experience, and that is also worth listening to. Yeah, and yeah, I think dance, because it's such a holistic practice, it includes the body, it includes the mind, it includes the soul. It can get you moving also, yeah, in reality, but also in your mind, and it can, yeah, how to express this now? It can transfer messages from the one to the other. And that is also why dance movement therapy works, because you do a movement that expresses your emotion, and then you think about it, and then you use movement as a way to awaken something, as a way to bring something into consciousness. So I think, yeah, it's all in the holistic approach of dance as a practice. Yeah. There is a question.
Yes, we have a couple of people with their hands raised. Let's see, Erin.
Hi, yeah. I wrote the question in the chat. It's actually, I'm wondering if there's actually been a scientific study done that actually shows that synchrony, parent-child synchrony, enhances child development?
So there, what I read is that the synchrony enhances the connection, and I also from the close connection and the healthy attachment that allows the baby to develop. So that is indeed a little bit of a, I don't know how to answer it for sure, like one paper, this is the proof. I just assume that if you have a healthy attachment that is nurtured via the synchrony and doing things together and spending quality time together, then that really allows the child to develop. But I can imagine that one can really look this up. And I mean, I can also just look it up and find it. Yeah.
I did a bit of research on this subject and I actually was not able to find anything. So I think maybe it's a scientific research that needs to be done, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Fun.
Chris, you have your hand up as well.
Katerina, I was just curious, when it comes to the EEGs and fMRI scans and whatnot, have all different types of dance been imaged? And is there similarities between the different dance forms? Or like, for example, tap dance, because it's a slightly different than the specific movements of like pop and lock, R&B, belly dancing, are they like different? Like, is this what I'm just curious, are there a lot more similarities or a lot more differences between different types of dance?
The studies I have looked through, they are bits and pieces. So some of it is with classical ballet, some of it is with hip hop. I'm not aware of tap dancing in these studies. Others just said, imagine you're copying the movement, and they show different types of dance within the same experiment. And then they had some other experiments. They had different experts of different dances. So I haven't been able to find, let's say, one certain type of dance that shows more than other types of dances. I also think that, yeah, like what would be the benefit of saying, let's say, only tap dancing helps in this? Like, we want to argue for dancing in general and how the connections between body and self-awareness, so brain, happen. So yeah, I had a similar consideration when I was doing my own experiments with music experts, because people said, yeah, but maybe you want to study only drummers. If you are working with rhythm, maybe these are the people who you are interested in. But actually, no, I wanted to find music experts. What is the benefit of any music expert? So in that spirit, I don't think, of course, you might have studies from different dance types, but I would take them all together, and then I would study what is the benefit of dance as a practice. And the very important factor is the hours of practice. So that has been the most, the factor that affects the results stronger than other factors. It's weird not to get an answer of thank you, or I don't understand if I addressed it. Is it okay?
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
yeah.
Thinking about dance and how it applies to birth, one of the things that I think is important is that the dance movements are coming in from internally. So something that you have, it's your body sending you the signal to do the dance move, and not your, modern thinking brain saying, oh, wait, I have to dance. I'm giving birth now I have to dance. And so it goes back to what you were saying about preparation and practice, having it in your body, having it be something that your body is familiar with. And so your baby can really tell you how you need to move. Your body can feel that, and then you execute it. So it comes from within.
Yeah.
There are some great studies out there now that have dealt with dance during labor. And some of the things that these studies are showing is that it decreases labor pain and shortens labor. It increases birth satisfaction. And it also results in fewer babies needing to go to the neonatal intensive care unit. So all good things.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, do we have any final questions for Katerina? Okay, well, we will draw this presentation to a close. Katerina, thank you so much for bringing your expertise on this subject and your whole body of work into this presentation for us. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that we really learned a lot, and we can apply this to our life and to our work. And yes, I want to thank you all for being here on the presentation. And and please visit us at dancingforbirth.com. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.